Imagine being born in the dust of a small Macedonian village, with no title, no wealth, no destiny written for you, just dirt under your fingernails and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer echoing through your childhood. That was Flavius Petrus Sabatius, the boy who would one day sign his name as Justinian I, Emperor of Rome. But how? How does a peasant's son end up on the most powerful throne in the world? Justin, a man who had walked barefoot from that same village to Constantinople decades earlier, carrying nothing but ambition, had somehow clawed his way up through the Byzantine military ranks. Soldier, commander, palace guard, and then emperor. When Justin I took the throne in 518 AD, he did something remarkable. He reached back into that dusty village and pulled his nephew into the palace with him. Justinian arrived in Constantinople as a young man, and he was immediately different. While other noblemen spent their days hunting and feasting, Justinian read. He studied law, theology, military strategy, architecture. He sat with scholars. He argued with priests. He was not just preparing for power, he was obsessed with it. But knowledge alone doesn't make an emperor. You need something sharper, something colder. Justin was old and increasingly unwell. The palace was full of men who wanted what he had. Men with better bloodlines, bigger armies, longer names. Justinian had none of that. What he had was patience and a mind that could turn every conversation into a calculated move. He became his uncle's shadow, advisor, strategist. The real power behind the aging emperor's decisions. By the time Justin officially named him co-emperor in 5027 AD, it wasn't a surprise. It was simply the world catching up to what Justinian had already made inevitable. And then Justin died. The throne was his, but inheriting an empire and actually controlling one are two very different things. The Byzantine Empire Justinian inherited was fractured, weakened by war, corruption, and a political class that had grown fat and comfortable. It needed to be remade, rebuilt from the foundation. Justinian looked out from the palace walls at Constantinople, and he didn't see what was. He saw what could be. The question was, did he have the strength to get there? Every great emperor has a story, but Justinian's story cannot be told without her. Theodora, a woman so controversial, so powerful, so utterly impossible, that even history struggled to decide whether to admire her or erase her. She was born into the lowest rung of Byzantine society. Her father was a bear trainer at the Hippodrome, the massive arena where Constantinople's crowds came to be entertained. When he died, her mother pushed her and her sisters onto the stage as performers. Theodora grew up under the eyes of a crowd that saw her as entertainment, nothing more. But Theodora refused to be what the world told her to be. She was sharp, dangerously sharp. She could read a room the way a general reads a battlefield, knowing exactly where the weakness was, exactly where to strike. And when she converted to Christianity and left her old life behind, she didn't become quiet or invisible. She became something far more dangerous. She became respectable. When Justinian met her, he was already one of the most powerful men in the empire. He could have chosen anyone, a noble woman with land and connections, a princess from a neighboring kingdom. Instead, he chose Theodora, and he didn't hide it. He changed the law to make their marriage legal, because Roman law at the time forbade men of his rank from marrying women of her background. Think about that for a moment. He rewrote the law for her, and she was worth every word of it. Theodora didn't sit quietly on her throne and wave at parades. She held audiences with foreign ambassadors. She corresponded directly with kings and bishops. She had her own political agenda, and Justinian didn't just tolerate it, he relied on it. There were decisions that would define the empire, decisions that Justinian hesitated on, and Theodora made them, clearly, coldly, without flinching. The real test was coming, and when it arrived, it would nearly destroy everything they had built. The city was about to burn, and the only thing standing between Justinian and total collapse was a woman who had already survived the worst the world could throw at her. January 532 AD. Constantinople is a powder keg, and someone just dropped a torch. It started, of all things, at the Hippodrome, the same arena where Theodora's father once trained bears. The crowd was divided into two violent factions, the Blues and the Greens. They weren't just sports fans. They were political gangs, deeply embedded in the city's power structure, capable of turning celebration into massacre in minutes. Justinian had made enemies on both sides. Two of their leaders were sentenced to death, and the execution was botched. The men survived, and the crowd did not take it well. What began as a protest turned into something no one had ever seen before. The Blues and the Greens, longtime rivals, stopped fighting each other. They united, under a single word screamed across the Hippodrome: Nika, victory. They wanted Justinian gone. Within hours, the city was on fire. Literally, the rioters tore through Constantinople with a rage that had been building for years, resentment against high taxes, corrupt officials, an emperor who had risen from nothing and never let them forget how much he had changed. They burned the palace quarter. They burned the great Hagia Sophia. They dragged a man from the royal family out of hiding and declared him the new emperor. Justinian's advisors were panicking. Ships were being prepared in the harbor, escape routes just in case. The emperor himself reportedly paced the palace halls, pale and shaking, considering whether to flee. And then Theodora walked into the room, and she looked at the men around her, generals, senators, advisors, and she spoke, calmly, with a clarity that cut through the chaos like a blade. She said she would not flee, that the purple robe of an empress made a fine burial shroud, that those who wanted to run could run. She would stay. The room went silent. Justinian called his greatest general Belisarius and gave him a single order: end it. Belisarius entered the Hippodrome with a small but disciplined force. The rioters, drunk on their own momentum, never saw it coming. In the chaos that followed, 30,000 people died in a single afternoon. The riots were over. The throne was saved. Constantinople would be rebuilt, greater than before. But Justinian had learned something that day that no scroll had ever taught him. Power is not just taken. It must be held with iron and with nerve. The fires were out. The bodies had been cleared from the Hippodrome, and Justinian got to work. What came next was not the reaction of a man who had nearly lost everything. It was the response of a man who had been waiting his entire life for this moment. The Nika Riots didn't break Justinian. They freed him, because when you have stared into the abyss and chosen to stay, you stop being afraid of what people think. First came the law. The Byzantine legal system was a disaster. Centuries of contradictory rulings, outdated statutes, forgotten decrees piled on top of each other like rubble. No one fully understood it. No one could fully enforce it. Justinian gathered the greatest legal minds in the empire and gave them an impossible task: take everything and make it make sense. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, a complete restructuring of Roman legal tradition, organized, clarified, and written in a way that could actually be applied. It wasn't just a legal reform, it was the foundation that would quietly shape European law for the next 1500 years. The legal systems of France, Germany, Italy, Spain, they all carry Justinian's fingerprints to this day. Then came the buildings. The old Hagia Sophia, burned to ash in the riots, was rebuilt. But Justinian didn't rebuild it. He reimagined it. He hired two mathematicians, not architects, mathematicians, and told them to build something the world had never seen. What rose from those ashes was a dome so large, so perfectly engineered, that the people who saw it completed believed it could only have been built with divine intervention. For nearly 1,000 years, it remained the largest cathedral on earth. Then came the wars. Justinian's dream was audacious to the point of madness. He wanted to reconquer the lost western half of the Roman Empire, and incredibly, he nearly did it. His general Belisarius swept through North Africa, reclaimed it from the Vandals in months. Then Italy, then parts of Spain. The old map of Rome was being redrawn in real time, but empires are not won only on battlefields. Plague swept through the Byzantine world in 541 AD, killing millions, draining the treasury, exhausting the army. The conquered territories slowly slipped away. The dream was bigger than the resources available to hold it. Justinian died in 565 AD. Old, exhausted, still working. He left behind a legal code that outlasted his empire by 1,000 years, a cathedral that still stands today, and a story that began in the dust of a Macedonian village and ended with his name carved permanently into the architecture of human civilization. The blacksmith's son had rebuilt an empire, not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably, magnificently. And that is the kind of story history never forgets.